The Belgian UFO wave was a series of sightings of triangular UFOs in Belgium, which lasted from the 29th of November 1989 to April 1990. Reports were filed, most many weeks after the events. Many of the reports related a large object flying at low altitude. Some reports also stated that the craft was of a flat, triangular shape, with lights underneath. The Belgian UFO wave peaked with the events of the night of the 30th to the 31st of March 1990. On that night, one unknown object was tracked on radar, and 2 Belgian Air Force F-16s were sent to investigate, with neither pilot reporting seeing the object. No reports were received from the public on the date. Over the next 2 weeks, reports from 143 people who claimed to have witnessed the object were received, all of them after the event. Following the incident, the Belgian Air Force released a report detailing the events of that night. At around 2300 on the 30th of March, the supervisor for the Control Reporting Center at Glans received reports that 3 unusual lights were seen moving towards Thorenbay-Gembloux, which lies to the southeast of Brussels. Approximately 10 minutes later, some later reports stated that a second set of lights were seen, moving towards the first triangle. Traffic Center Control at Semerzake tracked one object only on its radar, and an order to scramble 2 F-16 fighters from Beauvechain Air Base was given. Throughout this time, in reports after the event, some people claim that the phenomenon was visible from the ground, describing the whole formation as maintaining their relative positions while moving slowly across the sky. The pilots never reported seeing any of the claimed sightings, saw none of the claimed maneuvers, and never got a lock on any objects apart from the other F-16. The other contacts were all found to be the result of a well-known atmospheric interference called Bragg scattering. Members of the WARV Gendarmerie who had been sent to confirm the original report describe 4 lights now being arranged in a square formation, all making short jerky movements, before gradually losing their luminosity and disappearing in 4 separate directions at around 1:30. They also reported that a low engine noise was heard and that it seemed to have a stick coming out one end with a turbine on it, which has led many to conclude the object was a helicopter. In April 1990, a hoax photo of a triangular object upon which 3 lights are visible at each corner was taken by an anonymous photographer. Experts say there is no background in the photograph and no element that would allow calculation of the object's size or distance from the camera. A computer graphics simulation method to reproduce the photograph was developed by a Belgian mathematician, Thierry Veit, at the University of Liège Laboratory of Astrophysics, wherein the apparent shake motion that results in the lights of the craft appearing blurred or out of focus in the photograph contradicts eyewitness statements. On the 26th of July 2011, in an interview for RTL, a Belgian TV channel, Patrick M. explained that it was a hoax. In his 27th of September 2016, Skeptoid podcast episode titled The Belgian UFO Wave, author Brian Dunning discussed the photographic evidence and reported that the single photograph turns out to be emblematic of the quality of all the evidence that characterized the Belgian UFO wave. In 2011, a man named Patrick Maréchal invited Belgian reporters to his home to show them what he and some friends had done at work when the media hype had been at its peak. In 1992, about 3 years after the first sighting, which occurred on the 29th of November 1989, in Eupen, Mark Hallett wrote an essay about the Belgian UFO wave criticizing the work done by the SOBEPS, Le Vague OVNI Belgique au le triomphe de la désinformation, arguing that this UFO-logical organization was spreading misinformation in the media. Hallett's thesis is that the Belgian UFO wave was mostly a mass delusion, boosted by the work done by the SOBEPS. This mass delusion would have followed Philip J. Klass's law. Once news coverage leads the public to believe that UFOs may be in the vicinity, there are numerous natural and man-made objects which, especially seen at night, can take on unusual characteristics in the minds of hopeful viewers. Their UFO reports in turn add to the mass excitement, which encourages still more observers to watch for UFOs. This situation feeds upon itself until such time as the media lose interest in the subject, and then the flap quickly runs out of steam. In 1993, Pierre Magain and Marc Remy published an article in Physicalia magazine, in which their conclusions don't match those from the SOBEPS. They also state that the Belgian UFO wave would be better studied by people in the human sciences than by physicists. Most witnesses reported that the objects were silent. This report argues that the lack of noise could be due to the engine noise in the witnesses' automobiles, or strong natural wind blowing away from the witnesses. In his article The Beginning of the Belgian UFO Wave, Jean-Michel Abrassart argues that the beginning of the wave does not contradict the psychosocial hypothesis, contrary to what the SOBEPS claimed in his work. In an article published on his website in 2011, the Belgian wave and the photos of stuff, Auguste Meeson replied to several criticisms and argues that, according to him, the Belgian UFO wave is completely unexplained. Roger Piquet and Jean-Michel Abrassart both wrote rebuttals to the Belgian physicist's article. In The Belgian UFO Wave, Skeptoid podcast episode, Brian Dunning discussed the F-16 chase and reported that SOBEPS reported that they obtained radar lock on targets 9 times, but the Belgian military only reported 3 such locks, and upon analyzing the data, all 3 radar locks were on each other. Regarding the wave of eyewitness reports and lack of photographic evidence, Dunning concludes. You read a story in the paper that a UFO was seen flying over your town a night or 2 ago. You remember that you saw something you took for a bright star or an airplane, thought nothing of it at the time, but this amazing new story makes you realize that what you saw must have been this UFO. You and I might not necessarily make that connection, but it's perfectly reasonable that a lot of people will, and so they follow the instructions in the newspaper article and send a report to SOBEPS. With so many articles over a period of years in a small country, it's no great surprise that SOBEPS reported they eventually received as many as 2,600 in all. The 143 reports Meeson claims for the original November 29 incident were indeed received, but only after more than a week of aggressive and repeated solicitation in the mass media. It is only much later retellings of the story that wrongly assume all 2,600 were reported as people were watching the F-16s chase the UFOs, or that all 143 initial reports came independently on that first night. All the reports were after the fact, and were only made after prompting and solicitation by SOBEPS and the media. If 13,500 people did all actually see something that they took for a UFO at the time, I guarantee you that more than just a single photograph would have resulted.